The house at the edge of Blackwood Creek didn't just look abandoned. It looked rejected by the earth itself. I'm Julian, a man who spent 10 years chasing ghosts for a paycheck, but I never believed in them. Not until I stepped inside the manor left to me by an uncle I hadn't seen since I was 6. The air inside wasn't just cold. It was heavy, like breathing through wet wool. My boots crunched on shattered glass and decade-old dust as I moved through the foyer. That's when I heard it, the first sound that broke my logic. It was a giggle, high-pitched, rhythmic, and chillingly clear. It came from the nursery at the end of the hall. The room was empty. I knew it was empty because the door was hanging off its hinges, revealing nothing but a rusted iron crib and a layer of filth. Yet, the laughter continued, bouncing off the peeling wallpaper. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the silence of the woods. I stepped closer, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice sounded thin, a coward's plea. The laughter stopped instantly. Then, a voice, small and distorted, whispered from the corner where the shadows seemed to pool like spilled ink. "Julian, you're late for the game." I didn't have a daughter. I didn't have a niece. But the voice knew my name. I felt the hair on my neck stand up as the temperature plummeted. The nursery wasn't empty anymore. Or rather, it was, but the space where the air should be was vibrating with a presence. I saw the rusted mobile above the crib begin to spin. Slow at first, then faster and faster until the metal screeched. I backed away, my breath hitching in my throat. I stumbled into the hallway, but the door behind me slammed shut with a force that shook the floorboards. I was trapped in the dark with a child who shouldn't exist and a laughter that felt like a serrated blade against my sanity. The silence that followed the nursery door slamming was worse than the laughter. It was a pressurized, ringing silence that made my ears ache. I stood frozen in the hallway, the beam of my flashlight shaking as it illuminated the thick, dancing dust motes. I wasn't just a man in a house anymore. I was a specimen in a jar. The logic I had carried with me for a decade, the cynical belief that every bump in the night was a settling floorboard or a scurrying rat, was dissolving like salt in rain. I tried the handle of the nursery door again. It wouldn't budge. It felt as if the wood had fused with the frame, becoming a single, solid piece of the house. That's when the heat started to rise. It shouldn't have been happening. The windows were shattered and a winter frost was settling over Blackwood Creek, but the air around me began to shimmer with an unnatural, dry warmth. It smelled of ozone and ancient, scorched parchment. "Julian." The voice came again, not from the room this time, but from right behind my left ear. I spun around, swinging my heavy flashlight like a club, but there was nothing there. Just the empty, yawning throat of the corridor leading to the master bedroom. "You always were the runner," the voice giggled. "Just like your father. Run, run, until the ground runs out." My father had died in a mental institution when I was 12. They said he was delusional, that he claimed the shadows in our home were trying to trade places with him. I had spent my life running from that heritage, using ghost hunting as a way to mock the very thing that destroyed him. But standing here, I realized the house didn't just contain a haunting. It was a memory with teeth. I began to walk toward the stairs, my heart a frantic bird trapped in a cage of ribs. Every step felt like walking through deep water. The walls seemed to lean in, the peeling wallpaper mimicking the patterns of reaching fingers. As I reached the landing, the laughter erupted again. But this time it wasn't just one voice. It was a chorus, hundreds of tiny, high-pitched voices erupting from the floorboards, the ceiling, and the vents. It was a cacophony of madness that threatened to split my skull. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. "What do you want?" I screamed into the dark. The laughter cut off with surgical precision. The house went deathly still. Then, from the darkness of the foyer below, a figure began to climb the stairs. It wasn't a child. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs moving with the jerky, unnatural grace of a marionette. It didn't have a face, just a smooth, pale surface where features should be, reflecting the light of my dropped flashlight like a mirror. It stopped 3 steps below me. The air grew so cold my breath turned into a thick mist. It tilted its head, and even without a mouth, the voice vibrated through the air, resonant and deep. We want what was promised, Julian. We want the seat that was left empty. I realized then that this house was a seal, and by entering it, I had broken the lock. The reference files like English, auto-generated. Medusa offered me immortality in exchange for an eternal bond down sub at company TXT, and English, auto-generated. My ship sank and the Queen of the Abyss took me to her kingdom to train TXT spoke of ancient bargains and forced transformations. My uncle hadn't left me a house. He had left me a debt. The figure reached out a hand. A long, gray hand with too many joints. As its fingers brushed my skin, I didn't feel pain. I felt a memory that wasn't mine. I saw my uncle not as an old man, but as a young one, kneeling in this very hallway, drawing symbols in his own blood to keep the laughter contained. I saw the moment he failed, the moment he realized the only way to keep the entities from spreading to the town was to find a replacement. The laughter needs a throat to live in, the figure whispered. I scrambled backward, finding a sudden surge of adrenaline. I made it to the master bedroom and slammed the door, locking it with a heavy brass bolt. I leaned against the wood, gasping for air. But as I turned to look at the room, I saw the vanity mirror. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. Thousands of small, pale faces were pressed against the glass from the inside, their mouths wide in a silent, eternal laugh. And in the center of them all sat my father, looking exactly as he did the day he was taken away. He wasn't a ghost. He was a prisoner, and he was pointing at the floor beneath my feet. The reflection of my father didn't move, but the desperation in his eyes was a physical weight. He wasn't pointing at the floor just to show me where to hide. He was pointing at the foundation of the house itself. Outside the bedroom door, the rhythmic thump drag of the faceless entity stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against the door like a rising tide. Julian. My father's voice whispered, not from the mirror, but from the vents in the floor. The house is a throat, Julian. It's been screaming for 100 years, and it's finally losing its breath. If you don't take the seat, the throat closes, and everyone in this valley, gets swallowed. I looked at the vanity mirror again. The pale, faceless things were no longer laughing. They were pressing their smooth heads against the glass, cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. I realized the immortality promised in the ancient texts wasn't a gift of life. It was the curse of being a permanent pillar for a crumbling reality. The brass bolt on the door began to glow a dull, heat-distorted red. Something on the other side was melting its way in. I had no weapons, no rituals, and my logic had long since deserted me. I was just a man caught between a dead father and a hungry house. I looked down at where my father had been pointing. I used the heavy flashlight to smash through the rotted floorboards. Beneath the wood wasn't a crawl space or dirt. It was a void, a swirling, viscous darkness that seemed to pull the light right out of the room. In the center of that darkness sat a simple wooden chair, looking out of place and terrifyingly mundane. The seat, the faceless entity hissed through the melting door. Sit, and the laughter stops. Sit, and the town wakes up tomorrow. Sit, and become the memory that holds the walls up. The door gave way. The tall, jerky figure stepped into the room, its shadow stretching across the ceiling like spilled ink. It didn't attack. It simply waited. It was a cosmic bailiff come to collect a soul. I looked at the chair in the void. I thought about the people in Blackwood Creek, the families, the children, the life that continued outside these suffocating walls. My uncle hadn't been a monster. He had been a martyr. And my father hadn't been crazy. He had been a failed candidate. Does it ever end? I asked, my voice cracking. Only when the house falls, the entity replied. And the house only falls when there are no more of your bloodline left to sit. I took a breath, the air tasting of ancient dust and copper. I didn't want to die, but I realized I was already dead the moment I stepped over the threshold. You don't hunt ghosts in a place like this. You just wait for the ghosts to claim you. I stepped into the void. The transition wasn't violent. felt like falling into cold silk. I sat on the wooden chair, and suddenly, the cacophony of 1,000 laughing voices surged into my mind. But it wasn't noise anymore, it was data. I could feel every brick of the house, every blade of grass in the yard, every heartbeat in the town 3 miles away. The faceless entity bowed deeply. Its form began to dissolve into smoke, being drawn into the walls. The cracks in the mirror healed. The heat vanished. As the darkness fully encased me, I looked up through the hole in the floor. I saw my own body standing in the master bedroom. It looked healthy. It looked alive. Picked up my flashlight and my camera. "Thank you, Julian," my own voice said from the mouth of my body. The Julian standing above me smiled. A wide, unnatural grin that reached from ear to ear. He adjusted his jacket, checked the camera lens, and walked out of the room. I watched through the eyes of the house as he walked down the stairs, opened the front door, and breathed in the crisp morning air. He started the car. He drove toward the town. He was going to meet my friends. He was going to see my mother. And here I sit, in the dark, in the silence, feeling the weight of the roof on my shoulders. I am the house now, and I can feel someone new, someone with my blood, approaching the gates of Blackwood Creek. I began to laugh, and across the house, the walls laughed with me. If you love this story and want more contents like this, comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Also, check out the channel for interesting videos.